Winter had settled hard over the Wyoming territory, pressing its cold weight against the land and everything living upon it. The Mercer Ranch lay quiet, beneath a sheet of white fences, half buried. Cattle clustered close to the barn for warmth. Smoke rose in a thin ribbon from the chimney of the main house, the only sign of life against the frozen horizon. Inside, Colt Mercer stood near the window, watching the tree line. He had learned to measure winter by silence. When it was too quiet, something was wrong. Since his wife's passing a year ago, silence had become his constant companion. He filled his days with work mending fences, chopping wood, tending cattle. But when night fell, the emptiness crept in like frost under a door. A long, mournful howl broke across the valley. Behind him, Samuel stirred from his seat by the fire. "Pa, they're back." Colt's jaw tightened. He had seen the tracks near the southern pasture, large paw prints circling the herd. The wolves were closer than they'd ever been. "They won't come near the house," he said steadily, though he kept his rifle within reach. Little Clara padded into the room, clutching her blanket. "Are they hungry?" "They're always hungry," Colt answered quietly. Another howl answered the first closer. This time, Colt stepped onto the porch, boots crunching against snow. The air bit at his lungs. He scanned the ridge above the ranch. That's when he saw movement. Not just wolves, a rider. She emerged from the pale fog like something conjured from legend. Tall in the saddle, wrapped in a dark fur-lined coat, long black hair streaming behind her. Around her, gray shapes moved for wolves, pacing at an even distance, not threatening, not straying. Riding with her, Colt felt his pulse steady, not race. He was a man who had faced storms, cattle stampedes, and grief. But this was something different. The rider stopped at the crest of the hill. One wolf stepped forward, ears alert. Another circled behind her horse. She raised her hand. The wolves halted. Colt descended the porch steps, rifle angled low but ready. "That's close enough," he called. The rider nudged her horse forward. Anyway, slow and deliberate. The wolves followed, silent as drifting snow. When she reached the fence line, she studied him with calm gray eyes. Not wild, not reckless. Simply aware. "You're leading them," Colt said. "I'm guiding them," she replied. Her voice was low, smooth, carrying easily across the cold air. "They've been circling my herd. They're being pushed south," she said. "Hunters up north, less game. They're desperate." Colt glanced at the wolves again. They did not snarl or bare teeth. They watched. "You expect me to believe they won't attack?" "I expect you to understand. They prefer deer to cattle," she answered evenly. "But hunger makes anything possible." A gust of wind swept snow between them. Samuel peeked from behind the porch rail. The woman noticed. Her expression softened just slightly. "You have children," she said. "That's none of your concern." "It is, if the wolves grow bolder." Colt studied her more carefully. There was strength in her posture, but not arrogance. She carried herself like someone who had survived harshness, without letting it harden her completely. "You got a name?" he asked. "Alexandra," he nodded once. "Colt Mercer." "I know," she said. That unsettled him. "Pow." "Word travels. Widower. 2 young children, large herd. No hired hands." Colt's grip on the rifle tightened. "You've been watching us." "I've been watching the wolves." Silence stretched between them. One of the wolves, large and silver, stepped closer to the fence. Colt instinctively lifted the rifle. "Don't," Alexandra said sharply. The wolf froze at her tone. She gave a soft whistle. The animal lowered its head and retreated. Colt noticed something then. They weren't obeying out of fear. They were choosing to listen. "You control them," he said quietly. "No," she replied. "I understand them." Another howl echoed from deeper in the forest. Alexandra turned slightly in the saddle. "They're checking in." "You live out there?" Colt asked. She met his gaze again. "I live where they live. You expect me to just let you roam my land. I expect you to decide whether you'd rather have me guiding them more, no one at all." The honesty in her words struck him harder than any threat. Samuel's voice carried faintly from the porch. "Pa, she looks like she belongs out there." Colt exhaled slowly. He had spent the last year protecting what little he had left. He couldn't afford foolishness, but he also couldn't ignore the truth in front of him. "If you can keep them off my cattle," he said carefully, "you can use the northern ridge." Alexandra studied him, weighing the offer. "And in return," she asked, "you stay clear of my house." A faint smile touched her lips. "I have no interest in walls." She lifted her hand again. The wolves turned as one and began moving back toward the trees before riding off. She paused. "Winter is only beginning, Colt Mercer," she said. "You'll need more than fences to survive it." Then she was gun horse and wolves, disappearing into falling snow. Colt stood alone in the yard, long after she vanished. For the first time since his wife's passing, the loneliness felt interrupted. And somewhere beyond the ridge, a wolf howled not in hunger, but in something that sounded almost like promise. The wolves did not touch a single calf that week. Colt noticed tracks still appeared along the ridge, but they curved away from the pasture instead of circling it. The herd remained calm, no carcasses, no panic, which meant one thing: Alexandra was keeping her word. Still, Colt did not trust easily. Trust had cost him once before, when fever swept through the valley, and he believed his wife would recover like she always had. Since then, he believed only in what he could build with his hands. On the 5th morning, after her first visit, he found her again. She stood by the frozen creek bed, crouched low, fingers brushing over impressions in the snow. Her horse waited behind her, reins loose. 2 wolves lingered nearby, watchful but relaxed. "You're on my land again," Colt said. Without looking up, she replied, "Your southern fence is weak." His brow furrowed. "Excuse me." She stood and pointed toward a stretch of timber half a mile off. 3 men rode through there yesterday. Heavy horses, one limping. Colt's spine stiffened. "Scouts," she corrected. "They circled your boundary. Didn't approach the house." "How do you know that?" "I followed them." "You followed 3 armed men alone." She finally looked at him. "I wasn't alone." One wolf stepped forward, golden eyes steady. Colt crossed his arms. "You expect me to believe wolves can guard against rifles?" "No," she said evenly. "But men who think they're alone make careless choices." That unsettled him more than he liked. "You think they'll come back?" he asked. "Yes." The word hung in the cold air between them. Colt glanced toward the ranch house in the distance. Smoke curled from the chimney. Samuel would be helping Clara with her letters by now. "I can handle thieves," Colt said firmly. "I don't doubt your skill," Alexandra replied. "I doubt their mercy." He didn't like that she was right. "What do you want?" he asked bluntly. She studied him, as if measuring the weight of his question. "Access to your barn during storms," she said. "And supplies. Dried meat. Grain for my horse." "For how long?" "Until the thaw." Colt narrowed his eyes. "And in return, I keep the wolves north. I watch your borders. And if those men return, I won't be far." He hesitated. Letting her stay meant inviting uncertainty, closer to his children. But pushing her away meant facing both rustlers and wolves alone. "You sleep in the bunkhouse," he said at last. "Not the main house." Her expression didn't change. "Agreed." "And your wolves stay outside the fence. They prefer it that way." He extended his hand. She looked at it for a moment, then clasped it firmly. Her grip was warm despite the cold. That evening, she led her horse into the barn as snow began falling thick and heavy. The children watched from the porch. "Is she staying?" Clara asked. "For a while," Colt answered. Samuel squinted toward. "The trees are the wolves, coming to." Right on cue, shadows moved along the edge of the forest. "They won't cross the fence," Colt said, more to reassure himself than them. Inside the bunkhouse, Alexandra unpacked little just a bedroll, a tin cup, a small knife. She moved like someone used to temporary shelter. At supper, Colt brought her a plate. "You don't have to eat alone," he said gruffly. She hesitated only a moment before stepping inside the main house. The children stared openly. "Do they listen when you talk?" Clara asked. "They listen when I'm worth listening to," Alexandra replied calmly. Samuel leaned forward. "Are you scared of them?" "Even a little." Alexandra considered the question seriously. Fear keeps you respectful, she said. But I'm not afraid. Colt watched her as she spoke steady, composed, never exaggerating. And people? Samuel asked. That pause lasted longer, sometimes, she admitted. Colt caught the flicker in her eyes. A shadow of memory. After supper, a howl rose from beyond the ridge. Clara stiffened. Alexandra stood and stepped onto the porch. She tilted her head back and answered with a long, haunting call that rolled across the valley. The wolves responded immediately. Colt felt the hair rise on his arms. Inside, Samuel whispered, "She sounds like them." Colt stepped beside her. "You planning to leave when winter ends?" Was yes. The answer came too easily. He studied her profile in the moonlight. Strong, unyielding. "You ever think about staying somewhere?" he asked. She glanced at the house, where warm lamplight flickered against the curtains. "Staying means losing something," she said quietly. "What?" "Freedom." Colt didn't argue, but as snow fell softly around them and the wolves' howls faded into the distance, he found himself wondering something he hadn't allowed in a long time. Maybe freedom didn't always mean being alone. The storm rolled in without warning. By late afternoon, the sky turned the color of bruised steel, and wind tore across the valley with a howl louder than any wolf. Snow fell sideways, sharp as thrown gravel. Colt had just finished securing the barn doors when Alexandra appeared from the ridge, riding hard through the gusts. "They're coming," she called over the wind. "Wolves?" he asked. "Men." That was all it took. Colt moved fast, ushering Samuel and Clara inside. "Stay away from the windows," he ordered. He checked his rifle, loaded fresh rounds, and stepped back onto the porch. Alexandra dismounted fluidly. 2 wolves flanked Hurash, the great silver male, and Winter, pale as the snow itself. "You said they'd wait for thaw," Colt muttered. "They're not patient men." Through the storm, 3 dark figures emerged near the southern fence line. Rustlers. They rode low in their saddles, scarves covering their faces. One pointed toward the barn. "They'll try to scatter the herd," Alexandra said. "Then drive them east." Colt exhaled slowly. "Stay with the children." She gave him a look, sharp enough to cut rope. "You don't give me orders." Before he could argue, she whistled short, piercing. The forest answered. Shapes moved between trees. The rustlers fired first. Gunshots cracked across the valley, spooking the cattle. A rider kicked his horse forward, aiming for the barn doors. Colt fired back, his shot splintering wood inches from the man's shoulder. The wind screamed. Alexandra swung into her saddle and rode straight toward the chaos. "Alexandra!" Colt shouted. She didn't look back. Instead of firing, she rode parallel to the herd and let out a long, rising howl that cut through storm and gunfire alike. The wolves surged forward, not attacking blindly, but circling. Ash darted in front of a rustler's horse, snapping just close enough to send it rearing. Another wolf lunged at a rider's saddlebag, tearing it loose. Panic spread faster than bullets. "They're mad," one of the rustlers shouted. "No," Alexandra called across the wind. "They're protecting their ground." One rustler aimed directly at her. Colt saw it a second before the shot. "Down," he roared. Alexandra leaned low over her horse's neck as the bullet tore through her coat sleeve. Colt's return shot knocked the rifle clean from the man's hands. The wolves tightened their circle. Horses bucked and screamed. Within minutes, the rustlers broke. They fled toward the timber, abandoning a sack of stolen feed and 1 injured horse behind. Silence followed, broken only by heavy breathing and wind. Alexandra dismounted slowly. Blood stained her sleeve. Colt rushed to her. "You're hit." "Just a graze," she said calmly. He grabbed her arm, despite himself. "You could have been killed." "So could you." "That's different." "Why?" "Because my children need both of us alive," she finished. The words hung between them. Ash patted closer, brushing against her leg. She rested her uninjured hand against his thick fur. "You didn't need to call them," Colt said quietly. "Yes, I did. They could have turned." "They won't." "How can you be so certain?" She met his eyes steadily. "Because they trust me." Colt looked at the wolves, at the way they stood around her, not as weapons, but as guardians. Trust. It was something he hadn't given easily in a long time. Snow softened to a steady fall. "You saved my ranch," he said. She shook her head. "We defended it." He guided her toward the house, despite her protest. Inside, Clara gasped at the sight of blood. "It's nothing," Alexandra assured her gently. "Just a reminder to be quicker next time." Samuel stepped closer, studying her with awe. "You weren't scared at all." Alexandra paused. "Yes," she said honestly. "I was." Clara blinked. "Bravery isn't about not being afraid," Alexandra replied. "It's about choosing to stand anyway." Colt felt that settle deep in his chest. Later that night, after the children slept and the storm faded to silence, Colt stood on the porch beside her. "You could leave now," he said. "You've proven your point." "Yes, but you're not." She looked toward the tree line where the wolves lingered like shadows stitched into moonlight. "No," she admitted softly. "Why?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she listened to the valley, the wind, the distant shifting of cattle, the low murmur of wolves settling into the snow. "Then," she said, "because, for the first time in a long while, I'm not running." Colt felt something shift between them, not wild and uncertain like before, but steady, like the beginning of something rooted. And somewhere beyond the ridge, a wolf howled, not in warning, but in belonging. Winter loosened its grip, slowly, like a stubborn hand, unwilling to release its hold. Snow retreated from the fields in uneven patches, revealing damp earth beneath. The creek began to murmur again, thin sheets of ice breaking apart under the weight of moving water. Colt noticed the change in the land. He noticed something else, too. Alexandra had not left. The wolves roamed farther north, now that the worst of winter had passed, but she remained close to the ranch. Some nights she slept in the bunkhouse. Other nights she vanished into the forest, returning at dawn with frost in her hair and that distant look in her eyes. If she had traveled somewhere no one else could follow. The children adored her. Samuel followed her like a shadow whenever she repaired tack or sharpened blades. Clara sat cross-legged beside Ash without fear, braiding wildflowers into his thick fur when the first signs of spring pushed through the thawing ground. Colt watched it all carefully. One afternoon, he found Alexandra mending a section of fence near the ridge. "You don't have to do that," he said. She didn't look up. "It's crooked. It's standing. For now." He leaned against the post beside her. "You planning to leave when the snow's gone?" She paused, fingers stilling against the wood. "That was the plan." And now she met his gaze, guarded but thoughtful. "Plans change." Colt exhaled slowly. "I won't pretend I understand your life out there." "You're not meant to," she said quietly. "I do understand protecting something." Her expression softened at that. "You've built something steady here," she said. "Your children feel safe, because I fight to keep it that way. And if the fight changes," he frowned. "What do you mean?" She glanced toward the forest. "The wolves won't always stay distant. The land shifts, men return, seasons turn. Life always does," he replied. She stepped closer to the ridge's edge, where the valley spread wide below them, gold light spilling over open land. "I was raised between camps," she said suddenly. "My father trapped my mother. She believed walls made people weak." "And you?" Colt asked. "I believed walls meant loss." He studied her carefully. "You think staying here would make you weak?" "No." Her voice was almost a whisper. "I think it would make me vulnerable." That word settled between them, heavier than snow ever had. Colt understood vulnerability too well. "After my wife died," he said slowly, "I promised myself I wouldn't need anyone again." "And do you?" "Yes." The honesty surprised even him. Alexandra's breath caught slightly. "You don't belong to fences," he added gently. "But fences don't have to trap you." She searched his face for doubt, found none. Below them, Samuel and Clara laughed as they raced toward the barn. Ash trotted behind them, watchful but relaxed. "You'd let them stay?" she asked. "The wolves." She nodded. "If they respect the land," Colt said, "they're welcome." "And me?" The question was quiet, almost fragile. He stepped closer. "You were never unwelcome." The wind shifted, carrying the faintest echo of a howl from deep within the trees. Alexandra closed her eyes briefly. "I've always chosen the wild," she said. "It never asks me to change." "I'm not asking you to change, then. What are you asking?" Colt reached for her hands, lowly enough to give her time to pull away. She didn't. "I'm asking you to stay," he said. "Not because you need us, but because maybe we need you." Silence wrapped around them like a shared secret. For the first time, Alexandra did not look toward the forest for answers. She looked at him, and in her gray eyes, something fierce, softened, not lost, not tamed, but shared. That evening, she did not return to the bunkhouse. She remained on the porch, long after sunset, listening as the wolves settled into the distant hills. When a low howl drifted across the valley, it no longer sounded like a call to leave. It sounded like permission to stay. And for the first time since she had begun riding with wolves, Alexandra wondered if the wild could exist inside a home just as fiercely as it did beyond it. Spring arrived quietly, as if unsure whether it would be welcomed. The snow had nearly vanished from the valley, leaving behind soft earth and the first stubborn shoots of green. The creek ran fuller now, its waters bright beneath morning sun. The air no longer carried winter's bite, but something gentler, something alive. Alexandra stood at the edge of the forest, watching the wolves. Ash lifted his great silver head, ears flicking as birds stirred overhead. Winter stretched in the grass, pale coat blending with the last scattered patches of snow. The pack had grown restless in recent days, venturing farther north as herds of deer returned to higher ground. The season was changing. Was she? Behind her, the ranch house door creaked open. "Thought I'd find you out here," Colt said. She didn't turn immediately. "They'll be moving deeper into the hills soon," I figured. "You won't see them as often." "I wasn't expecting to," he replied calmly. That made her glance at him. Most men would have asked her to choose. Colt never had. He stepped beside her, boots sinking slightly into soft earth. "Samuel's been asking if Ash will still visit." "He will," she said. "Wolves remember kindness. And Clara," a faint smile touched her lips. "Clara will always be brave." They stood together in companionable silence, the kind that didn't feel heavy or demanding. "I built something," Colt said after a moment. She arched a brow. "That sounds dangerous." He chuckled under his breath. "Come see." Reluctantly but curious, she followed him down the gentle slope toward the ranch. Near the tree line, just beyond the main fence, but still within sight of the house, stood a small cabin. Not large, not confining, but solid. Smoke curled faintly from its chimney. "You did this?" she asked. "Started it weeks ago," he admitted. "Figured if you stayed, you'd need space that wasn't borrowed." She approached slowly, fingertips brushing the wooden frame. The structure faced both the forest and the ranch, balanced between worlds. "You don't assume much, do you?" she asked quietly. "I learned not to, and if I'd left, I would have let you go." Her throat tightened at that. Inside, the cabin was simple: one room, a hearth, a narrow bed, a small table. A window looked directly toward the trees. It wasn't a cage, it was a bridge. "You built this for me," she said. "For you," he agreed. And for them, a soft bark sounded outside. Ash stood just beyond the doorway, watching. Alexandra stepped out and knelt, resting her forehead briefly against the wolf's. "I'm not leaving," she whispered to him. Ash exhaled softly, as if he'd known all along. When she stood again, Colt was watching her, not with possession, not with expectation, but with respect. "You once said staying meant losing something," he reminded her. "Yeah. Do you still believe that?" She looked from the forest to the ranch. "To him, no," she said slowly. "I think staying means choosing." He stepped closer. "And what are you choosing?" Alexandra felt the wind shift around them, not pulling her away, not urging her forward. "Steady." "I'm choosing both," she said. "The wild and the walls. The howl and the hearth." Colt reached for her hand. This time, there was no hesitation. Behind them, Samuel burst from the house, Clara close at his heels. "Is she staying?" Samuel called. Colt looked at Alexandra. She squeezed his hand once. "Yes," she answered. Clara whooped with joy and ran straight toward Ash, who tolerated the embrace with noble patience. The valley felt different, now not divided between danger and safety, but joined that night. As dusk painted the Wyoming sky in amber and rose, Alexandra stood between the cabin and the ranch house. The wolves howled from the hills not distant, not mournful, strong, alive. She tilted her head back and answered, but when the echo faded, she did not turn toward the forest. She turned toward home. Colt wrapped an arm around her waist, steady and warm. "You still ride with wolves," he said softly. "Yes," she replied. "And now?" She rested her head against his shoulder. "Now, I ride back." Above them, stars scattered across the wide western sky. The woman who once belonged only to the wild had not been tamed. She had been understood. And in that understanding, love took root, fierce as any storm, steady as any mountain, and free as the wolves who still ran under open sky. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.